I've gotten many requests to cover the 3D arena fighting game Kill la Kill If. The reason for all these inquiries is that it's apparently a good and complex arena fighting game, which is a rarity in today's gaming climate. But when I actually looked into this game, all I found were mixed reviews and what seemed to be a commercial failure. So was I lied to? But as I dug deeper, I found a divide. Anime game fans who like the game versus casuals who dislike the game. And beneath all of that was development drama that eventually led to this game's swift and inevitable demise. This is how Kill la Kill If almost saved anime games. Normally, I would start by covering the game's initial reveal, as well as details revealed leading up to the game's release, but we actually need to start further back during the game's development. The Kill la Kill anime first started airing on October 4th, 2013, and finished airing on March 28th, 2014. It was an anime original project developed at the critically acclaimed studio Trigger, and headed by director Hiroyuki Imaishi. Upon release, the anime was met with widespread commercial and critical acclaim. However, talks of a video game adaptation wouldn't surface until a year later in 2015, when a producer at Arc Systems Works posted a tweet about enjoying the anime. This set up a meeting between Arc Systems Works and the Kill la Kill rights holders, but nothing came of it as Arc Systems Works already had their hands full with multiple other projects. A year later, a second meeting was held to revisit the idea, this time involving A+ Games, who had previously worked with Trigger on the game Little Witch Academia Chamber of Time. A+, being an affiliated studio with Arc Systems Works, and having already worked with Trigger, seemed like a perfect fit for the game. So Arc Systems Works' Guilty Gear team drafted a pipeline for development, with A+ taking the project from there. However, the game sat in development hell for a year after this initial draft due to Trigger's harsh demands. A+ had developed multiple iterations of the game, each of which was shot down by Trigger. Director of the project, Hideki Mizoda, mentions how we pivoted 2 or 3 times during development. The first iteration that we had put together, we showed to Studio Trigger, and they said, "What is this?" And they wouldn't even let us in the studio. After receiving Trigger's feedback, Arc Systems Works shifted the lead roles to Mizoda and producer Takeshi Yamanaka, as well as brought back their Guilty Gear team to provide development support and help create the final iteration of the game and what it is today. To give you an idea of how much the project had pivoted during development, they even considered switching to a 2D fighter for their final iteration, but Mizoda said that would have gone far above the project's budget. The constant switching of direction dealt a serious blow to the development team. Yamanaka commented on the development difficulties, saying that it's also more damaging to the team's spirits to be destroying everything that had been done midway so as to make way to rebuild the project, and it's definitely more challenging than to make something totally new. Aside from the constant reworking the game went through, Trigger was just plain difficult to work with. A number of animators from Trigger were heavily involved in the project, who Yamanaka referred to as hot-blooded masterclass animators. These animators were constantly requesting highly detailed changes to the game and its models, but they didn't understand how developing a game works. Mizoda comments on this issue, saying that with animation deadlines, you can really push it very close to when something's actually released because you're dealing with different formats of data. But with video games, obviously, you have to make a disc, submit it for first-party approval, and there's lots of other steps. That means you can't really work on it as long as you can work on an anime. Even with the help from Arc Systems Works, this game's development was rocky and fostered a strict and grueling work environment. Nevertheless, despite the constant changes and requests, the game was set to release on July 26th, 2019. Leading up to its release, Kill la Kill If got barely any coverage. There was an initial announcement trailer in June 2018 that didn't reveal any gameplay footage. There was a second trailer in July 2018 featuring an early look at the basic gameplay, and then a third and final trailer in April 2019 going in depth into the gameplay and game modes. The game finally released on July 26, 2019 on PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam to mixed reviews. It currently sits at a 68 critic score and 6.5 user score on Metacritic. It also didn't garner a very large user base, peaking at a mere 44 players on Steam in its first month of release, only to drop down to a measly 8 players the following month. The majority of these mixed reviews were a result of a lack of content, poor optimization, and a simplistic fighting system. But that last point is somewhat controversial. When this game was released, a lot of big gaming news outlets like IGN called the gameplay simplistic and claimed that it lacked depth. But when you look closer into the anime game community, many people were saying the opposite. What the anime community had decided was that Kill la Kill If was the closest we've ever gotten to a complex arena fighter. Was Kill la Kill If just another in a long line of crappy arena fighters, or was it a hidden gem that could revolutionize the arena fighter genre? There's only one way to find out. Let's take a deep dive into Kill la Kill If. Before we go in depth with the gameplay, let's clear up the issues with this game that everyone can agree on: the noticeable lack of content and the poor optimization. This game features a story mode, offline versus, unranked and ranked online matches, practice, a survival mode, and a horde mode. The story mode is decent for Kill la Kill fans, but not very great for non-fans. The story mode is split into two sections that both tell the same story, but from different perspectives. The first for Satsuki Kuryuin, and the second for Motoi Ryoku. Both of these story modes are original stories written by the series' original writer. Getting brand new story is great, but it has its downsides. Like I mentioned before, it's not very good for non-fans of Kill la Kill. I've never seen the anime, and the game does a poor job of introducing the characters and explaining the plot. So I had no idea what was going on, and just opted to skip all of the cutscenes instead. As for fans, they get a new story, but it's incredibly short, taking about 2 hours per character storyline for a total of 4 hours. And even then, the quality of the story mode is not very high. It's a couple of versus matches strung together with some CGI cutscenes, some of which look good, whereas others just look lazy. There are also some horde battles in the mix, but those are incredibly boring and button mashy. Another component of this game that's lacking is the character roster. At launch, there were only 8 playable characters, which is really weird because there's an alternate version of each of the 2 main characters in story mode that aren't playable outside of story mode. So at launch, a roster of only 8 characters was practically next to nothing. Post-launch, they did add 2 more via free updates, but ending with only 10 characters is still a very small roster, especially for an arena fighter. Aside from the story mode and lack of characters, the game just doesn't run very well. I noticed multiple frame rate issues while playing, especially during horde matches. The graphics for the most part look good, but they don't seem to be up to the Arc System Works standard of quality. I know the budget was tight for this game, but it really looks like the budget was tight. Now we get to the largest point of contention: the gameplay. At first glance, this game seems like your run-of-the-mill anime arena fighter, but there are a number of options and mechanics that push it past that generic label. In terms of controls, you can walk, dash, jump, block, sidestep, close range attack, long range attack, block break, use one of 3 abilities, and activate Bloody Valor. Again, it may seem very generic, but there's actually more going on behind the scenes. Every character has an anti-air, which is already a step ahead of every other arena fighter. Creating combos in this game is also very fluid, as you're able to easily string together your close range, long range, and block breaking attacks, which again is a step ahead of other arena fighters who only have one button to press, like Naruto's Storm. Despite there being a trivial amount of characters, each of them feels incredibly unique. In most arena fighters, all of the characters will eventually feel samey, but here, all of them feel distinct, the majority of them having their own mechanics and meters to really set them apart from each other. All of this sounds great, so why did it still receive such low reviews? The first reason is the Bloody Valor mechanic. You can spend half of your stamina meter to activate Bloody Valor, which envelops both players into what is essentially a rock, paper, scissors game. Each of the 3 options beats one of the other options and loses to one of the other options. Winning a Bloody Valor will activate some effect dependent on which option you chose: increased damage, extra health, or recharge stamina. Most were not a fan of this addition. You can technically try to read your opponent, but most of the time it's going to be RNG, and it will always be RNG if you're fighting a CPU opponent. The second reason is arena fighter fatigue. During this time, it felt like every anime was getting an arena fighter. Naruto had the Storm series, One Piece had Burning Blood, Dragon Ball had Xenoverse, and what was the most egregious example was Jump Force, which is just released months prior to Kill la Kill If. It was safe to say that players wanted a fresh new anime game, not a regurgitated arena fighter. So while Kill la Kill If did invent a number of new mechanics to push the arena fighter genre forward, all that most people saw was yet another generic anime 3D arena fighter. Kill la Kill If shortly died after launch. Like I mentioned before, it was never much of a player base to begin with, most likely due to a lack of proper marketing and arena fighter fatigue, but to make matters worse, there was very little maintenance and updates after release. The game had a total of 5 updates and 2 DLC characters before support was dropped for the game only 4 months after its release on November 29th, 2019, with the final update and final DLC character. To be fair, the DLC characters were free, which was nice, but not nice enough to save this game. You can still play the game online, but judging by the fact that there were only 5 people playing when I don't think you're going to find a match. I also didn't mention that since they dropped support for this game, it's left in an unbalanced and buggy state. I think it's safe to say that the initial low player count mixed with Trigger's overbearing development was enough for Arc System Works to end support for Kill la Kill If. Kill la Kill If was an anomaly in the anime arena fighter timeline. It introduced a number of mechanics that might not have made it the most complex fighting game, but was certainly a step in the right direction, especially when it comes to arena fighters. But unfortunately, a number of factors held it back from revolutionizing the anime game scene. An overbearing studio breathing down the necks of the developers prevented it from having a proper development cycle, ultimately leading to a minuscule budget and a lack of content in its finished product. A lack of marketing and the fact that the anime the game was based on was already 5 years old at the the time of release led to a small player base at launch. The lack of content and overall arena fighting fatigue led many to write the game off as yet another generic anime 3D arena fighter instead of spending more time with the game to learn its deeper intricacies. These three factors ultimately led to a dead player base and the developers ending support for the game. What was supposed to save anime games and revolutionize the arena fighter genre was reduced down to yet another failure in the long line of arena fighters. Will we ever see a proper and fully realized anime arena fighter? Only time will tell.